Welcome to a special edition of Legal AF. The Senate's and the Senate Democrats trying hard to provide oversight and checks and balance over a corrupt Trump administration has moved into an entire new phase, including during the shutdown, as they also fight to protect Americans who have been cut off from funding almost every day of this 50 plus days. And our audience wants to be briefed by the people that are in the trenches, the leaders of the Democratic Party in the Senate. I can't think of anybody better to brief our audience about things like what you can do about a corrupt Trump administration, what you can do about the weaponization of the Department of Justice, and what is going on with the tear down of the White House and the building of a ballroom by donors who apparently are also tied to either enforcement actions, regulatory actions, or have business before the government. And so we're going to bring in Senator Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut to join Lisa Graves of Court Accountability in Action and me, Michael Popok, here on Legal AF. Welcome, Senator.
Thank you so much for having me. Great show. I'm really honored to be on it.
Yeah, and we're honored to have you here. And it's one thing for Lisa or me to do honest commentary about what we're observing with our experience. It's a whole nother thing to have somebody who we admire and who's been working so hard here during the second Trump administration to hold them accountable. Let's start with some people who may not know you, and I know that's it seems like it's impossible given your long public service. But you became a star again in the cross-examination and grilling of the Department of Justice head Pam Bondi. Let's open it up there. What is the strategy and tactics that you use as a member of the Senate in the minority party, for right now at least, when you're dealing with having the head of the Department of Justice, well, not Donald Trump, but the one that has the title, in front of you to be cross-examined in front of the American people? And how did it go the last time she met with you?
The whole point of that line of questioning was to show, in fact, that Donald Trump is running the Department of Justice, and he is directing her and the Department of Justice, which really is no longer about justice, to indict, charge, investigate his political opponents or simply people he doesn't like. And I think the important part of the questioning was simply to elicit the truth. And, there was nothing particularly artful or skillful about my questioning, although as a trial lawyer and attorney general for 20 years and the U.S. attorney, chief federal prosecutor in Connecticut for 4.5 years, I'd like to think that I know how to ask questions and even cross-examine. But her pushback was so unprecedented. I've never seen a witness in all my time of observing congressional hearings, not to mention the 15 years that I've been on the Judiciary Committee or other committees in the Congress, be so antagonistic and defensive, go on the attack against a member of the United States Senate without answering any of these questions. So it was a surreal, bizarre, and really outrageous performance by her. And clearly, she had an audience of one, which is the President of the United States. She didn't really care what we thought of her. She didn't care what the American public believed about her. She wanted Donald Trump's accolade.
In fact, we'll show a clip now of you and Pam Bondi and some of the things that you're talking about. And then I'm going to come back and ask you, I have a particular question I want to ask you about how you prepared for her and the way she approached this. Let's play the clip first.
The night before James Comey's indictment, you had dinner with the President of the United States. Pretty intimate group.
Actually, there were a lot of people there that night. That's a great picture.
Was James Comey discussed at that dinner?
I love that picture. That's a great picture. And there were a lot of people there that night. I think the entire cabinet was there.
Did you discuss James Comey with the President of the United States? He was sitting just to your left.
Well, 2 seats down, yes. 2 seats down. And I am not going to discuss any conversations I've had or not have with the President of the United States.
Because the American public is entitled to know, Madam Attorney General.
The entire cabinet was at that dinner.
Whether you took instructions from President Trump after he told you very directly to indict James Comey, which is weaponization of the Department of Justice.
So my question for you, Senator, is she comes in with palm cards that were obviously prepared for her or by her. I see Stephen Miller's hand. I see a bunch of other people's handwriting here and some of the ways that she approached this. And she starts going on the attack, not just against you, but against everybody that asked her a question. Bringing up something from their past or bringing up some donation they made or somebody that they stood with in front of a podium before she would answer the question. Were you ready for that? And then if you weren't, in other words, I know you're ready because you're a good trial lawyer like I am, but once you saw that this was the way she was going to do it, because I don't think you were the first one to ask questions, how did you on the fly sort of change your tactics towards her?
We knew that she was going to push back. We didn't know how personally antagonistic she was going to be. And of course, I began seeing her reaction to Durbin, denouncing him and saying he, in effect, didn't care as much about Illinois as he hated Donald Trump. She went after Sheldon Whitehouse for something his wife was doing. I can't even remember what it was. And then others before me. So I knew something was coming because every time she was asked a question, she would pull out a file. And as it turned out, it was a dossier, a kind of file on each of us. And so I was ready for something. And, my style is just pretty straightforward. I wasn't about to argue with her. My role was to elicit information. And I'm accustomed to being before a jury as you are. A jury doesn't want, personal arguments back and forth. They have an obligation to determine the truth. And that's what the American people want. And that's what we showed them actually in that hearing, that here is a attorney general supposed to be an objective prosecutor misusing her power to persecute people simply because they're on the wrong side of the president, not on the wrong side of the law. And that hearing was before even a lot of what we've seen since that is so absolutely repugnant to the Department of Justice. I should just say, I can remember vividly my first experience walking in the halls of the Department of Justice. I'd been a law clerk to a Supreme Court justice. I'd been a prosecutor, but there is something about the ethos and tradition of the Department of Justice going into court, and as Justice Jackson once said, not having the objective of winning cases, but doing justice. And what they're doing now as his personal lawyers, remember, as you well know, America knows, Bondi, Todd Blanche, they're his personal lawyers. They're doing his personal bidding. And that is so abhorrent to the ethos of what the department should be, which is the people's lawyer. I always said I was the people's lawyer as Connecticut's attorney general. And they have the mission and obligation to serve justice, not the president of the United States.
Absolutely. Lisa?
Yeah, I share your just shock and disappointment about what's happened to the Department of Justice. When I was working in the Office of Legal Policy, it was my honor to walk in on that Pennsylvania Avenue side with those aluminum doors where engraved it says the place of justice is a hallowed place. And Pam Bondi has desecrated that place of justice. And her performance before the committee was shocking. The notion that our tax dollars were spent to create opposition research, attack, smears, propaganda, disinformation, attacking members who have legitimate oversight responsibilities under our constitutional system of checks and balances. That is an astonishing squandering of our taxpayer money to basically, as you say, serve Donald Trump, continue to act like his criminal defense attorney while being paid by us as the leader of the Department of Justice, but really just the figurehead, because it is Donald Trump who is directing the department and its actions. I wonder if you could share with us a little bit about the most recent actions you and some of your other senators have been taking to respond to the just everyday increasing level of pay-to-play corruption that is happening with that destruction of the East Wing of the White House, the people's house, but also the obfuscation, the deceit, and as Michael mentioned, the very possibility that some of the people who are donating, are donating in part because they want to get a break from DOJ. They don't want their cases to go forward, or in other instances, maybe they want a merger to go forward, as we've seen with CBS and other efforts. Can you talk about just the magnitude of corruption that we're seeing?
The magnitude is beyond anything we could have imagined. And what is maybe most shocking and even now surprising is how flagrant and blatant it is. The cryptocurrency corruption, where the Trump family is literally making billions of dollars, and we're trying to uncover through whatever investigation we can do what's going on there. The donations to the East Wing Ballroom, that great big 90,000 square foot monstrosity that he's going to build with gilded halls to replace a symbol, an iconic, emblematic symbol of America. And the donors, again, we've uncovered some of them. More have been found out over the weekend as a result of excellent reporting by the New York Times. And we've written to them along with the original list, asking them to divulge to us. These are private companies, who solicited them, how much each is giving, what kind of matters they have, whether there was any agreement on them. And your point is absolutely right. If you look at Amazon, Meta, Google, they have antitrust investigations or cases involving them. If you look at Booz Hamilton and Lockheed Martin, and many of the others, for that matter, Palantir, they have defense contracts. If you look at some of the crypto companies, Ripple and others, they obviously have matters that are under investigation or regulation. You go down the list of these companies, and I could spend, the next 20 minutes going down that list for you. And every one of them has a reason to be in Trump's good graces. And they are simply kowtowing to him and cultivating their own special interests. And a lot of the solicitation, as we're discovering, has been done by lobbyists who have special connections to the Trump White House. And we want to look at them as well. Now, I am very clear-eyed. I'm in the minority. I'm the ranking member on the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigation. If I were chairman, I would have subpoena power. There's no way that the chairman, Ron Johnson, is going to be on my side. Maybe he might be at some point if we can uncover enough that his conscience is moved, or politically he feels pressure to do it, or other members of the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations push him to do it. But we are going to absolutely insist on as much information as we can from these private companies. And then we're going to name and shame. If they won't give us information, the question the American public has a right to ask is, what are they hiding? What are they concealing? Why aren't they answering these questions? It can't be because they have privacy interests, because they're companies. And they are, most of them, obligated to serve their shareholders, not their personal interests, and to make public a lot of this information at some point to regulatory agencies like the SEC. So we are going to push as hard and relentlessly and tirelessly as we can for accountability. That's, I think, your central question. It is the central question of this presidency, because there is so much just outright corruption.
In fact, Senator Blumenthal, you said earlier that when you did Pam Bondi, when she was before your committee, even the things that came out after, like the indictment of James Comey, the indictment of Letitia James, the appointment of I'm going to be kind for a minute, a novice federal prosecutor hours into her tenure, like this was a Halloween costume where she got to dress up like a federal prosecutor, but go in and indict the former FBI director and the sitting New York Attorney General. That hadn't yet happened. But Pam Bondi is going to be, and Kash Patel, they're all going to be back in front of you once again. So now that you know, and now that you have the benefit of seeing where the Kash Patel and Donald Trump enemies list is going, and the way that they've appointed I'll just say it, a political hack to be the prosecutor to go after these people. I don't think she has any belief that she's going to be confirmed by the Senate for the permanent job. That's not her role. Her role is to indict as quickly as possible because they're, as he said, Trump said in one of his social media postings, Pam, we're running out of time. Hurry. All right. So she did her job. She'll go back and slink back into the White House when this is all done, having indicted these people and smeared their names. So what can the Senate do? What can the Senate Democrats do at this moment in regard to that type of criminal prosecution being started in weaponized Department of Justice?
There is this thing called whistleblowers. And throughout my time as a prosecutor at the federal and state level, I've seen people come forward and speak truth to power. Here in the United States Senate, with big tech, we saw whistleblowers come forward to speak truth to power about Facebook, now Meta. And as a result, we have more than 80 co-sponsors to legislation, the Kids Online Safety Act, that would impose some limits on the way big tech is driving harmful content, eating disorders, and bullying, and even suicidal ideation toward children using its algorithms. And we are pushing for more whistleblowers in this area, maybe in some of those companies that are donating, but also within the Department of Justice. And let me just say that, there's an adage, the hottest places in hell are reserved for those maintain their silence in times of crisis. A lot of these very brave and dedicated Department of Justice lawyers are resigning. A lot of them have been fired, and they have stories that will reveal, in effect, the corruption of the Department of Justice. We are making use of them. We can't call hearings on our own. Only the chairman of the committee can do it. But we have done the kind of, we call them spotlight hearings. And they involve the same witnesses that we would if they were regular hearings under oath. And they've attracted literally thousands of viewers. More people go to our live stream on these hearings and watch the regular hearings of the Judiciary Committee, literally.
And we simulcast them on Midas Touch and Legal AF, and we amplify that. We have a trampoline effect. We'll get 1 million people watching your hearings. I'll tell you one person who's calling out to be invited for one of your shadow hearings, Senator, and that's former Special Counsel Jack Smith.
And we will have him for sure. Yeah. We want him to come forward. And we're going to continue finding more of the donors who evidently didn't want their names revealed. And let me name them. BlackRock
for the dining room, for the ballroom.
Exactly.
Let's shame them now. Go ahead, Senator.
BlackRock, Susquehanna International, NVIDIA, OpenAI, Vantiv, Extremity Care. Vantiv and Extremity Care are healthcare companies that have very significant interests in the Medicare and Medicaid area, where they want certain products to be covered there or other kinds of special treatment. OpenAI has very significant regulatory issues. I could go down this list, but you get the idea. And so we will use every possible resource to expose this corruption to the American people. We've also asked the White House for a full list of all the donors. We've had no real response yet. And we have other steps that we're planning to take. And, a lot of this, again, to go to your original question, which is the central one, how do we impose accountability? What's the answer? And ultimately, supporting groups that are taking the administration to court, Protect Democracy just comes to mind right away, but there are others. And then voting. And the administration knows about the importance of voting because it's trying to undermine it. Not only redistricting, but also in effect, taking election machines, literally the machines, and requiring states to surrender them to the Department of Justice, disbanding the voting section of the Civil Rights Division, and CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Program, which it has decimated. It's assigned all of these lawyers to immigration cases. It is disbanding the protections of the right to vote. And of course, the Supreme Court will consider the challenge to Section 2. They're trying to eliminate it. You know, the Department of Justice was defending the Civil Rights Voting Right Act of 1965, and now it's taking the opposite position. So
first time in our history, the Department of Justice took a side against the Voting Rights Act in a Supreme Court argument.
But, you know, ultimately, we want people to be informed. We want them to be angry. I've been to all the indivisible rallies. They are great. The No Kings, hands off. It is a visible expression of anger and outrage. And, you know, I've just come back from Connecticut. I go back every weekend, but this weekend was special because it's the weekend before local elections. And you might think, oh, local elections, they don't matter much. We got gubernatorial races in Virginia and New Jersey. Those are the big races. But every one of these towns has an opportunity for people to register their anger against Trump. And they can do it by early voting or going to the polls on Tuesday. And we need to make sure that we safeguard that right to vote.
Yeah. In fact, one thing, Lisa, because this is going to be airing on Election Day, and I was going to ask you to speak to the voters, because you talked about your long history as an attorney general. I've been fortunate to interview a number of attorneys general, mainly from blue states. I'm going to be going later in the month to Arizona, where they all get together at a conference and doing individual interviews. But Rob Bonta for California was with me in person in California, on San Diego, on No King's Day. And a very timely time for him to be together. And he coined a great phrase, which I told him I'm going to happily rip off, which is, it's the 3 C's. It's courts, crowds, and courage. And I think you just summed it up right there. Polling is one thing. And I love the fact that Donald Trump is in the dumpster, as we would have expected for his second term, the lowest poll numbers we've ever seen. But now you got to get off the couch, and you have to go into, this is your opportunity, whether it's a special election or it's a local race or governor race or the redistricting, Prop 50 in California. Now is the time to start talking to Donald Trump and MAGA and telling them what you think about the direction of the country.
You know, that is so true. Crowds, courts, courage. Maybe in reverse order.
Yeah.
But they're all 3 are so important. And the attorneys general have been doing wonderful work. Makes me miss my old job because they have been winning in court. They've been winning in court on the SNAP benefits. They've been winning in court on the firings. They've been winning in court on protecting civil rights and liberties, even on behalf of immigrants. And the conduct there has been so gravely illegal in many instances, including detaining American citizens. But at the end of the day, you're absolutely right. And what I told the rallies that I went to over the weekend is, number one, you can send a message, Donald Trump, and we have the opportunity to create a wave. It may not seem like much to have Norwich and Milford and Brantford and, you know, there are 20 cities that had or have Republican first selectmen or mayors, and flipping them, creating that wave, using that muscle. You know, democracy is like a muscle. It's not a spectator sport. If you don't use the muscle, it atrophies. Yeah. If we don't get people to use that muscle, go to the polls, make a habit of it, it can erode. And so I think to the voters of Tuesday, I would say, please use that muscle. It's a great opportunity. It's what distinguishes us from all of our adversaries around the world. And at the end of the day, as Hillary Clinton used to say, it's not the example of our power, it's the power of our example.
Yeah.
Lisa, anything?
Yeah, well, I'm so glad that you raised that about the targeting the right to vote and all that we have to do together in this election and the elections next year to protect the security of those elections from this overreach by the administration. As you know, when the Voting Rights Act was signed into law in 1965, LBJ said that the vote is the most powerful instrument ever devised by man for breaking down injustice. And that, destroying the terrible walls which imprison men because they're different from other men. So really that discrimination that we're seeing just on the rise, the right to vote is vital for us to basically take that on and channel that righteous anger toward justice. And so I'm so glad to hear of all of your encouragement to constituents in Connecticut and nationwide to use that right to vote, to defend that right to vote. And also, I just want to say, Senator, I know you said, maybe you wish that you were back as Connecticut Attorney General, which you had, so many victories for the consumers and people of Connecticut and across the country through your extraordinary and excellent litigation as Attorney General. But I myself am so glad that you are the ranking member of that committee on investigations, that permanent committee, because your devotion to justice, your devotion to challenging corruption and exposing it is just so vital for what we need right now in America, is you to stay right where you are and keep on it. So grateful for your time today, Senator.
Yeah.
Well, I plan to stay where I am, and I plan to make voting rights one of the central priorities. I gave a speech on the floor of the Senate last week. It was about, I think, maybe 20, 25 minutes. I never give speeches of that length, but I did it with the kind of poster boards about each of the ways the administration is trying to undercut and decimate the right to vote. So this is a long-term campaign for me. I'm going to be inviting my colleagues to come down and have colloquies. I'm going to be working with the Brennan Center and other organizations, maybe the two of you.
Oh, yeah.
Raising the alarm, sounding the alarm about this systematic, it really is strategic and systematic, because they know that if the vote is fair and full, if they are barred from imposing proof of citizenship, for example, it's almost like the poll tax that used to exist, the assault on birthright citizenship. It is totalitarianism. It's not on the distant horizon. It's here and now. And the vote is the pinnacle, as John Lewis used to say. It is the first of all the rights because all the others depend on them. And as I tell people, we need to make good trouble, just like John Lewis told us to do.
We'd love to have you back on a regular basis, updating our audience about that signature set of proposals that you're going to be working on to hold this administration accountable and protect our right to vote. And we've got a Supreme Court that's working overtime to take away and decimate the Voting Rights Act and the legacy of the Great Society. And we're so glad to have people like you that are out there fighting for us every day. Thank you, Senator Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut, to join Legal AF, Lisa Graves, and Michael Popok. Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.